Well, Donald Trump, he came within an inch of death yesterday as a sniper's bullet pierced his right ear. But a second stunning photograph appears to show another bullet flying through the air, that there circled in red. Well, joining us live now, former FBI agent who served on protection details, Mike Harrigan. He joins us now. Mike, could that be anything else? Are you fairly certain that's one of the bullets?
Well, it's hard to say definitively, without doing a complete forensic analysis of this, looking at the closely at the film. But, from the analysis I did on that, it's plausible. It's very plausible. It would be one of those 1 in a million photographs that just snapped at the exact right moment.
It's just, I mean, there are so many extraordinary photographs, but that one really hits home too, doesn't it? Just how close he came to near certain death.
Absolutely. When I talked to the New York Times correspondent who contacted me about that photograph and had me look at it, and coincidentally, I was driving back from Butler, Pennsylvania last night. I was there on another matter, personal matter, unrelated to the campaign. And I'm driving through the mountains and I get this call about this photograph. And we looked at it. I looked at it closely. I did some quick calculations on typical velocities of that type of round and the type of camera they use there. And I saw no red flags that showed that this photograph was obviously tampered with. And that's scary to think how close that bullet came to him. And when you think there were multiple bullets fired, that could or could not have been one of the ones that went through his ear. Could have been one that just flew close by. But that was an extraordinary piece of photojournalism there.
From a security perspective, Mike, was this a Secret Service failure, the fact that this kid was able to get so close and was able to get a shot away, in your view?
Yeah, in my view, absolutely a failure. In protection work, anytime there's an attack on the principal or your protectee, it's a failure, right? Especially at pre-planned events such as this, where you have time to set up the event and you have time to lay out your security plan, implement your security plan. Always a failure. Now, sometimes those failures can be beyond the reasonable scope of what the Secret Service can and should have done. In this instance, with the shooter approximately 130 yards away from a rooftop, I mean, that's a very basic tenet of protection work, is to protect your high ground, to clear that area and secure it. So clearly a failure. Now, whether it was a human failure based on an oversight or lack of competency, or maybe the other side could have been a lack of resources that made some tough decisions on the ground for the team leader to put people where he thought the risk was highest. So it'll take a good after-action review here, which is got to be done and will be done, to really look at the circumstances and find out why this happened.
I mean, you've got that video as well, don't you, Mike, of people in the crowd who were able to see and identify the shooter before any shots were fired. It was just extraordinary, and he was so close, just over 100 metres away. And I've got no idea when it comes to firing a weapon, but I mean, a 100-metre shot, is it that hard?
No, that shot's a pretty standard hunting distance type shot, 100 yards plus. And it all comes down to the equipment he had, whether the rifle was sighted in correctly, what type of optics he had, and his skill level as a shooter. But in these circumstances, you don't have, the Secret Service has to be good every single time. The shooter only has to be good once and be lucky once. That's the problem here. Yeah. So, untold in this is, all the other potential threats the Secret Service interdict every day through their good intelligence work and engagement and planning. And this is one of the worst case scenarios. And I'm sure those agents are feeling extremely bad now. And inside the Secret Service command structure, they're having some hard discussions and really looking hard at what happened yesterday. Yeah,
and those investigations continue. Just a final one, the investigations into the 20-year-old kid. I mean, how does that take place today? I mean, by all accounts, according to reports this morning, bit of a loner. It's a common story when it comes to gunmen in these sorts of situations, doesn't it? He liked computer games, pretty quiet kid. How does this investigation take shape?
It's an interesting thing because, like you say, it's a loner kid. We call it a lone wolf actor, potentially, depending on what they find there. Lone wolf actor And it depends on what kind of communications and what kind of signs he gave off to friends, family, and maybe law enforcement or other officials prior to this event. Was he on anybody's radar? Did they know of him? Had he made any prior threats or made any concerning statements? But these are hard because, when you look at these attacks, the first thing you want to know is whether this is part of an organized group that may have other attackers out there that have other phases of the attack they're planning. That's the biggest concern, because this guy's neutralized. He was neutralized immediately. So the Secret Service and now the FBI, of course, are really looking hard to find out, did this guy have associates that were planning with him, or was he on his own? And unfortunately, these lone guys that maybe sit in their basements on the internet and get radicalized or get these ideas, they're very dangerous, but very hard to interdict if they haven't come up on the radar before.